Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about I'm the Evil Lord of an Intergalactic Empire, Season 1, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I guess I should have figured... obviously, when we got introduced to Liam at the beginning of the first episode, and obviously a little bit at the end of the first episode, he's like a teenager or whatever, but now we're starting with him at 5, and it makes a lot of sense, because you're not going to start off from scratch, but the fact is, I guess also, I wasn't sure if okay, is this entire world being made just for him? It's like, is this a world that already exists, and he's basically jumping into a body of someone that already exists, and I guess that's how that was going to go. It's an interesting timing too, because obviously this anime's running at the same time that was at the beginning after the end, which has a similar thing of someone basically reincarnating into someone else's body. They do start off as a baby, though, to my understanding. I haven't watched it yet. I want to. I just haven't taken the time to jump to that series yet. But just interesting timing and stuff like that. And I'm sure maybe there's this ain't like something unique. Like, obviously, it's probably been done quite a few times against other series, but this is like first time I've really, really seen that utilized in this capacity. But either way, Liam is on because it's not Earth, it's not like a reimagined Earth, it's like his family owns and controls basically a solar system, kind of. That's where the intergalactic empire aspect of it comes, because his family kind of runs all this, maybe all these particular planets in a solar system type of situation. And he gets, we get introduced to mom and dad, and he's got a butler named Brian. I thought it was so interesting when they're like, hey, you can make your own maid. You should do this. You can make their eye designs. Like, whoa, there's nipples. It's like, yeah, you might as well pick what type of nipple they have. And he's just like, what kind of parent is showing this nipples to their kid? And she's like, well, you might want to pick one because you don't want to come across a weird situation of not picking a nipple. Oh, basically, here's some genitalia you need to pick for the maid. And he's like, once again, why are you showing this to your 5-year-old? This is wild. But dad comes over and he's like, oh my God, son, me and your mom, we're going to live off in peace and go somewhere, and we're going to leave this entire thing to you. And I was like, and when that happened, I was like, okay, I get it, like typical anime thing of, hey, the parents aren't really in the story. This is your story, so we're going to bug her off or just not be referenced at all. But I'm like, that's so interesting, this bait to the story that we're completely just writing the parents out of the story. I guess it's almost meant to be a joke, but then we find out later on they wrote themselves out of the story because that family is in massive debt. They have been for basically 2 generations. The great-grandfather was awesome, except he didn't raise his heir, Liam's grandfather, right? So his grandfather and father kind of squandered and screwed the whole thing up, and now they're massively in debt. And so they ended up having a child just to leave everything in their child's care, just to kind of abandon him. I'm like, that's super effed up. I would have never thought that that's where that story was going. I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's also kind of effed up that the butler kind of knew this, but he kind of kept it hush-hush until Liam's like, yo, I am the owner of all this. I'm kind of the master in this regard. You kind of have to follow my orders and tell me what this is all about. It's like, yeah, his parents abandoned him. It's like, he even kind of acknowledges, like, man, it's screwed up. I went from a situation where I was used and abused in my old life, in that world, and now I come to myself in this situation where I've been abandoned, where I'm going to be tossed under the bus, because eventually people will come to try and claim what he has, because there's going to be a whole bunch of debt collectors and stuff like that. And obviously, because of the way the family's been run for, once again, the past 2 generations, there hasn't been a lot of prosperity. There's been less tax money coming in. Just everything's screwed up. And now people are finding out, oh, now the person at head of the family who's in control of everything is a 5-year-old. So that's going to invite more trouble their way. But obviously, we get a proper introduction to Amagi. We got introduced to her at the beginning of episode 1, but we get a proper introduction to her now as the maid that was made. Obviously, first thing he did was squeezing her boobs, because he's like, yes, I went about creating the great amount of softness, which Brian's like, what are you doing? That's not appropriate to be doing that in front of people. It's like, hey, Amagi, let's go to the playroom once. I'm like, I get it, you're a 36-year-old man in a 5-year-old body, but still, I was trying to think, obviously that whole thing has kind of been utilized before. It's not that big of an age gap, but obviously, the whole Shinichi and Conan situation in Detective Conan, there was an anime it might even been a manga series too. I watched it a long time ago. It's basically like a detective series about the god of mischief Loki, but basically it's kind of like Detective Conan except with uh gods, and the main protagonist, it's literally the god of mischief Loki in the form of a kid body. So I don't remember, it's been so long ago. Like I said, I don't know if that was just an anime or whether it was a manga too or not. Either way, it just kind of made me think about all that. But this is a pretty big age gap. I feel like there's other examples of that massive of an age gap is applicable. Like I said, the beginning after the end is probably a more applicable in this regard. um but it's like real creepy because it's like, well, what did you do in the playroom? I mean, she's also a robot, and it's just kind of, well, AI robot, because we also find out in this world a lot of interesting world building too. Because the guy that kind of acts as a guide that sent our main protagonist here and gave him this life kind of talked about like, oh, like he has a long lifespan in this world, and we find out what that lifespan is. He's a 36-year-old male, but I mean adult, but in this society, 50 is the slight cutoff point. 50 is more like how 18's kind of adult, but really it's 21. In this world, 100 is kind of considered adult, whereas 50 is kind of like 18 in a lot of ways. So, and apparently in this world, people can live to like 500 or 600 years old. So, interesting developments. I was like, that's fascinating. But after finding out all this stuff, Liam's like, man, that's kind of screwed up. But then he turns to Amagi. It's like, right, let's team up together, and we'll kind of make this all happen and make this all work together. And kind of, we're both outcasts, and let's basically make everyone else the outcast, and we'll be kind of a team. And she says no, because we don't need to worry about being a team, because I'm already your servant and you're my master. And so he's about to impart the 3 tenets of being a robot, like don't harm humans. But he was like, you know what? Screw that. Nah, screw that. 1, don't ever harm me. 2 was basically like, don't ever put yourself in a situation where like even your inaction could harm me. And basically rule 3 was like, also always prioritize protecting yourself unless it comes in contradiction with rule 1 and rule 2. And then she accepts these rules. And also another thing we found out, I was trying to remember, it's like there's something else we learned in this episode. I couldn't remember what it was, but it's like AI are not well liked in this world because there was a war with AI. AI went out of control and basically enslaved humanity and wiped out a good chunk of humanity to the point they were on the brink of extinction, which is that kind of interesting thing of, you got that far with AI, why would AI exist anymore either way? Like, are there just mad scientists being like, well, we're going to keep AI around, we have a better control of it now so that it never like ever gets in a powerful enough position to do that? But I'm like, that's still keeping a ticking time bomb around, right? Like, after coming that close to extinction, like, you think humans would destroy AI and never make it applicable. It also speaks volumes of like, yeah, it's kind of effed up on your parents' part to be like, yo, we're leaving you in AI, but it's like that way, like they can, I guess, feel better about abandoning you, even though they're leaving you with a massive debt that you'd have to collect and kind of deal with while they're kind of off on their own. I think it'd be interesting if Liam ended up tracking down his like parents in this world and like killing them, and probably, or like throwing them to the wolves to collect and be used as collateral for like the amount that the family owes. I don't know. Who knows? Probably will never see his parents again, but just kind of an interesting thing to think about. But either way, obviously Liam doesn't know anything about bureaucracy or kind of running things, and he wants to kind of leave it to Amagi, because Amagi suggests like, yo, there's these stasis pods that are basically like educational things. They kind of work like the hyperbolic time chamber of like, hey, you'll be in there for 6 months, but you'll end up learning like 10 years worth of knowledge, and it'll build up your body. So I was like, okay, so we're not doing the time skipping thing of like, technically speaking, we're only going to do 6 months, but it will probably age up about 10 to 15 years in that time frame. So he'll probably be like 15 to 20, somewhere in that time, to look the way he does by the end, like at the beginning of episode 1 and the end of episode 1. So yeah. And there's also the interesting conversation with Amagi too about, does she have emotions? And she's like, not really. It's not something really programmed in her. But when he asked if they could be a team, like she was like, there was a certain kind of resonance inside of her. Like there was some kind of reaction. So it did spark something. And even he's like, huh, I picked the best of the best pieces, and I wonder, did that play a role in it? Because she did seem kind of like shocked and almost like, whoa, when he was like, let's team up, because most humans don't like AI. Even Brian's like, yo, you can't leave an AI to run things, it's kind of illegal. But she's like, no, there's no rule against it. They frown upon AI usage, but it's not completely outlawed or legal. Once again, I go back to the point I made earlier. Why would you allow AI to have any freedom, considering the fact is you literally were on the cusp of extinction? But maybe it's like I said, maybe it's a thing of just like, maybe there's like a real world parallel where it's like, hey, AI is here, you can't really do much about it. You can try and mitigate it as much as possible with like some red tape and some guidelines, but eventually it's going to expound and go further beyond you can really, the bounds of you being able to rein it in. So we'll see where things kind of go on that front. We also have back in, and I'm curious to see if we will do any more bouncing back to it, or is this the last time we'll see it. But back in, I guess, the regular world, our hero is dead. His soul left his body and basically inhabited the body of Liam in that world. And the guy is super happy. He's like, oh man, guys like you who are sad and life is kind of shitty, you're a dime a dozen. And then he switches over to like the main protagonist is ex and her new guy, and he snaps his finger. So he could have mitigated that situation. He could have basically gave what's his face. Well, I was gonna say what's his face. We actually don't know his name. Our protagonist like retribution, but he chose not to because he feeds off like the misery and suffering. So he was like, ooh, I'm gonna let you live in this world where it's like, oh, let you have your fun, but eventually you're gonna live for a long time, and all that suffering and stuff will be mine to gobble up, and I'll feed off of it for a long time. And then he goes off and makes the protagonist's ex miserable because it's like, yep, snap of a finger, the cops have showed up, they got evidence to prove like, yo, you framed that guy, you embezzled that money and you framed a guy, you're going down for a long time, and as time goes on, we will be stacking more charges on it. So she is left taking care of her daughter alone, because whatever money he has will definitely be frozen, because that's how that typically goes. So all that betrayal led to nothing. Even the guy that loved you, even if he was in a position to take you back, I don't think he would, because obviously he still cared about his daughter. He would have still done stuff for her, even though she's not his. So now it's like, what does your life look like? Because at first I was like, oh, are you going to like give her a choice too and send her to a different world? He just kind of wrecked her life and then just like, let me gobble up that misery and then I'm going to bounce. But what was interesting though is as he was leaving, there was like this golden cat or whatever that came over to the main protagonist's body and then followed the guy through the door. So you're like, what the hell is that? What's that about? Is that something that's going to follow him to his where the main protagonist is as Liam? Like, is that going to follow him there? Because like, I wonder, is the guide actually going to like watch, kind of like very much like if you're familiar with Marvel, like the Watcher has this little space where he watches over the entire multiverse. I wonder, is the guide going to be like that, or will he be kind of specifically in Liam's world, watching from the shadows, so like an omnipresent force in that world, but not being seen? Or will he be seen? Or like I said, will he just be watching from like that interdimensional doorway he went through in space? So a lot of questions on that front. We also got introduced to a somewhat proper introduction to Christiana. She's a princess from another kingdom, and she's basically going to war with other people that came in to kind of like deal with her empire. So I guess maybe Liam eventually came and conquered hers, considering she like wholeheartedly, by the beginning of episode 1, she's wholeheartedly like serving Liam. So he must have came and gobbled up her empire, and now they kind of serve her because she is a princess. So it could be like her kingdom was destroyed and now she serves him for whatever reason. Not unless it's, I don't think, I was about to say, not unless it's like he married into the family, because it's like, well, he's a count and she's a princess, but we'll have to wait to see where things kind of go on that front. But some interesting developments, and I'm really curious to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.